Hello and welcome, everyone. We got a virtual recording with Josh and I, Eric Foster, CEO of Woop Insurance.
Josh Evans on a nice little casual Friday here. Thank you for making the time, Eric.
Yeah, absolutely. Look at us. We're casual. We're at home. We're on Zoom. What are we doing right now?
Um, I think we're living in the modern world is what we're doing.
I think you're right too. I think you're right too. And I appreciate you doing this remotely because I had a topic I wanted to talk about today, Josh.
I wonder if it has anything to do with the modern world.
Indeed, it does. Indeed, it does. So I wanted to talk about car buying, specifically buying a car online. And the reason why I wanted to talk about it today is obviously through our last conversations, we talk a whole lot about like insurance, how it blends into car buying, how it blends into automotive finance, etc. But we've been tracking. We do a lot of business with retail auto. We work with automotive finance companies, and I've seen in the very short period I've been in this industry, the car buying experience changed drastically. And this week, I read probably the best article that summarizes not only what has happened since 2019, pandemic, et cetera, but also where it's going. And I could not agree more with what I read.
Well, so get me up to speed, man, because I haven't read the article yet.
All right, so here it is. So it's a Forbes article, and basically it's given the recap of, if you go back to 2019, particularly with like car dealerships. So we're thinking franchised car dealerships have name of manufacturer associated with them. There's a lot of push to like start online car buying, a lot of consumer demand associated with this. And back in 2019, all the talk in town was really about margin compression. So dealerships just weren't making that much money. A lot of one of their main sources of revenue was always going to be all the additional ancillary products post sale, but they were starting to lose money or make a lot less money on the actual sale of the vehicle itself, not from all those additional like add-ons that you buy within the dealership. So with customer demand and dealerships starting to really push into more of that digital car buying process, the expectation was it's going to really pick up. And then the pandemic hit, and then everyone thought, oh wow, car buying is really going to go on right now because everything was remote. And for a while, everything did have to be remote. Many states
Right.
literally couldn't even go into the dealership to buy that vehicle. So the expectation was, all right, 2020, this hits. 2021, we're never going back. Like, this is the future. We're living in the future. 2021 comes, and there's this massive retrenchment of dealerships not really offering cars online, the user experience driven way back more to the old process of coming to the dealership, traditional sale, even like basically a huge theoretical step back from like what was seemingly to be the nonstop progress towards digital, right? And the article I was reading did a great job of explaining why. And basically, like, I don't know about you, Josh, if you've seen and heard and read at like car prices are going. Is this news to you?
Right. It is definitely not news. I was really interested to see on our buddy car dealership guy that even with everything going on today, there are still some makes and models of cars that are tending to sell for up to like 15 or $20,000 above MSRP.
Crazy to think about, right? It's crazy to think about. So prices are insanely high. They are starting to come down a little bit, but like prices in general are much higher, right? So what this article was saying was that there has been a lot. One of the main reasons that vehicles are not being sold online is because they've become more expensive. Like the supply chain has really limited the availability of what vehicles are out there. And then that, normal economics 101, supply and demand, dealerships had a lot of demand, a lot more supply, so they could increase the prices associated with this, right? So the prices have gone up because there's more demand than there is supply. So it is then in the dealership's best interest to get someone in the store because they're going
Right.
to make money not only on the sale of the vehicle itself, but they can actually also restrict to the buyers who are more likely going to buy the ancillary services. So what that means is like, dealerships make a lot of money from servicing the vehicle. That is a huge profit center for them. So they want you to come back and be able to service the vehicle at their location. I'm sure they do a great job. but they may even restrict the buying to not offer to out-of-state buyers because they won't make as much because they're not going to service them if they're 200 miles away, right? So what the article was saying is that um, there has been less online sales because the supply has been limited. Dealerships can make more money by having people come into the actual location. So naturally, that's of course what they're going to do.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm wondering as well, like, I've been to NADA, like I've gone to a lot of conferences, I heard a lot of people in this industry, like, speak at length about like strategies around sales for vehicles. And like one of the things that seems to be like a prevailing hive mind opinion is that like even in today's world with all the research out there, buying a car can be an emotional decision. And a lot of the emotions come into play on the sales floor. And I'm wondering if and how dealerships are going to adapt to that reality. And I'm also wondering if one of the reasons that sales aren't picking up so much online is because of just that it's like it's hard to click that button, right? It's easy to sit down with somebody who's treated you really nice for a couple hours and drove you around and reassures you that, hey man, just sign right here, you got nothing to worry about.
Yeah, it is, and it's a very expensive button click, probably more expensive button click than I will ever make in my life, right? Um, yeah, I do think that is an integral part, and there's lots of studies. Cox does a great study that says, the vast majority of people want to purchase a car online, but that is only represented by a very small, select number of pure end-to-end digital buyers. Now, whether that's because they want the touch and feel of that, or whether or not the tools are really adequate, that is to be like no one can really answer that question. But there are definitely different schools of thought on it. So what the rest of what this article was saying, and this is like probably the most interesting and most important thing that I could ever explain to anyone who wants to know when cars are going to be sold online and how easy and frictionless it'll be. So here's what it started identifying. Supply is starting to pick back up. That is again normalized, right? But with the pandemic, because there was such a demand, you needed fewer salespeople. It was more of like growth. People were coming directly to that dealership because they needed to buy the car. There's a lot more demand than there was supply. Now there's going to be a lot more supply and less in demand. So, but with that, 2020 did offer all these new car buying capacities, all these tools, they exist, right? So what the article was saying is online car buying, specifically through dealerships, will start to transition to be a way to offload inventory. So
Right.
if anyone's not familiar, like dealerships will often have incentives from manufacturers. And for illustrative, say you have to sell 100 cars per month, but you don't make that. And if you sell 100 cars per month, you'll make $1 million. Make a number something.
Right.
If you're at 95 cars per month and it's the 30th of the month, you really want to sell those last 5 cars, and you'll probably even sell them at a loss to make sure that you're able to offload that inventory, hit your number, get that $1 million paycheck, right?
So you're saying that that old wives' tale is true? That the best
Oh
time to
yeah,
get
that is the case. When there's incentive programs, you can buy at the end of the month. It is good for you, right? So what the article was saying is now, because they can offer these things online, dealerships will start to have selective inventory available online, and they will undercut the prices in order to hit those incentive-based programs. And this finally made sense to me because this is the pure alignment of like supply and demand. Dealerships will make their money, it's profitable, but they'll do it in a way where it is of the most value to them. And then on the consumer side, you're going to get great deals. You'll be inherently looking for great deals because this is businesses that want to offload the inventory. And then all
right.
the light bulbs went off for me. I'm like, this is the future of car buying. It is going to be through third-party distributors where dealerships will post select inventory for inventory that they want to offload in order to meet incentives that are put together by the manufacturer.
That's really interesting. I'm wondering one thing is like, the dynamic of that is pretty different than like what we've seen in the past years. And just given the fact that like some OEMs, like Hyundai, for example, with their partnership with Amazon, are starting to kind of explore online direct channels. How do you think the OEMs will react to car dealers using platform sales?
Right. So one, like I think the Hyundai and Amazon thing is really, really fascinating, super interesting. It shows that like consumer buying behavior is changing, but like they'll even say, every press release says there's a lot to work out there.
Yeah,
There's still a lot that has to work out. The dealership has to participate in that. So important thing to remember is like there are franchise laws that restrict manufacturers to sell directly to the public. It has to go through a dealership, right? So
right.
the dealership has to be involved. And I think the most important thing to think about when you're looking at like what Amazon, Hyundai, or any other comparative like a cars.com type of partnership will look at is how does it make sense for every single party? And I think that's where, like, again, where it kind of clicked in the article for me is maybe those Hyundai dealerships, and I don't know anything that's not public, right? Will just put certain types of inventory that they know will either appeal to someone who's going to pay more for a really digital seamless experience. And like it's kind of what Carvana does for used vehicles today. It's not usually the best price. You often can go to a dealership to get a better price, but it's easier. It's less of your time spent. And I think that's what will start to happen with those like Amazon Hyundai like experience where dealerships will put their select inventory. It'll be a seamless buying experience, but it's only going to be the inventory the dealership or the manufacturer mutually want to offload for either hitting sales incentives or selling, gauging more market share so that the manufacturer's stock price goes up.
It's so funny that you kind of hit on that because like I feel like we've been gaslighting the world into thinking that like no haggle is in the consumer's best interest. But it's like basically like a nicer way, it's a nicer way of saying, you will pay the price that we've listed because we're making this as easy as possible for you. And we are not discounting.
Like yeah, like that is a I don't think there's you're spot on, right? I
Yeah.
completely agree. Like you do pay a premium for no haggle. Um, but like that is with everything in life. And anything else you buy, you're normally paying for more because you're not haggling. But like if you think about the concept of haggling, it's really a very granular level to match supply and demand based off of that individual asset. And that might not make sense for buying a bag of apples at the store, but for $100,000 specific piece of property, yeah, you can understand why there can be like more micro negotiations for one specific unit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, it's all really interesting, and I think it plays into a lot of things that we've been thinking about lately. And, even some of the conversations we've had from like just exploratory standpoint, I don't know how deep you want to get into just like the all of the interesting conversations we've had over the last year, but even in like, the private space in traditional um digital retail platforms, algorithmic approaches, and then even just like network based, sales and savings groups. Like it's just so interesting to me to see how many different angles digital disruptors are approaching this problem from. And I think the OEMs and the franchise dealerships are a step behind the technology that a lot of these really smart people have built to kind of solve for a problem that a lot of the folks who are stakeholders haven't yet realized that they need to solve for.
Yeah, so I would agree. I would agree with some parts of what you said, and then disagree with other parts of like I think there's tons of new and value additive innovation, particular like technical innovation around the private selling of vehicles and the used market distribution of vehicles. But I do think it's important like to decouple that from like a manufacturer's only selling new cars because there are like lots of specific rules around how that manufacturer can distribute that, as well as for a dealership who's going to be selling new inventory. There's
Oh
lots
yeah,
of
yeah, of
rules.
course, of course.
But
And
to
I
your
think
point, no,
that
go
this
ahead.
is
Go ahead.
yeah, both sides. I mean, most dealers are dealing with both sides, right? So you might have two
All
separate
right.
businesses under
Yeah,
one roof.
yeah,
So I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah,
I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just wanted to clarify what my thinking was there.
yeah. No, totally, totally fair. But I think that's good. I would like to talk a little bit more about like, so you have come to me with a whole lot of different opportunities of like, hey, we have somebody that's in like the used space that is selling vehicles in a novel way. Can we plug our insurance solutions based into that? So I'd like to hear your thoughts of like, what do you see as like the novel innovations that are coming forward within like the used inventory selling or private selling market?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a ton. If you think about how this journey started, right? I remember the first time I met someone that bought a vehicle off of eBay. Um, I thought that they were insane, right? But now, like yesterday, Ed just bought a vehicle from like a salvage site online, sight unseen. Ed on our from our team,
Yeah.
and I still think he's a little crazy, but he's handier than I am. So, um, but and even out to myself, I am an obnoxious Tesla driver. I did my full purchase online, right? So, just to kind of prime the pump, like I think it's gone from a point where someone like me, who's like probably, even though we're in the tech space, probably a little bit of a late adopter for a lot of things that like carry risk. To now complete full level transactions, the world's warming up. And some of the folks we've spoken to, we had a really interesting conversation with the guy from letyouknow.com, which is like an algorithmic matching approach to car sales. So he's got a network of dealers, and forgive me, Boris, if you're watching this, but if I get this wrong, but he's got a network of dealers that are willing to set threshold prices for certain makes and models for certain time periods. And on the other side of the market is consumers who have a price that they're willing to pay. And the thought process is just what you were saying, like a more efficient way to offload inventory at a price that is baked in for convenience for both sides. Of course, we've got the Amazon deal, which we spoke about. Another interesting thing on the new auto side that I just saw actually today. There was a fella I used to work with over at Trustpilot who just got promoted to head of sales for this company in Europe called Auto Uncle. And I have been diving into this like crazy. I don't speak German too well.
You're hitting that translate button a lot, right?
Yeah. But it seems really similar to that workflow you're talking about. I don't know what the triggers are for the cars being listed, but basically, it takes in, from what I understand, like all of the cars listed within their network. Sets a fair price for it and allows consumers to choose who they're dealing with based on location, convenience, and price. So it's like a platform sale, right? So like
Yeah.
if you think about like the logic behind Amazon, for resellers, it's only natural that like these larger commodities are going to be pulled in. And then I think like on the private side, like one of my favorite guys online to like stalk his LinkedIn page every day because he's always posting cool stuff is our buddy Brad Parker from Private Auto.
Yeah.
I really like what they're doing. I really like it, and the reason I really like it is because I have tried to navigate um, the market, from a traditional sense of like buying and selling used cars, and it's a pain in the butt, dude. It really is. Like you never know who you're dealing with, and I actually I had sold a car one time, um and the guy I sold the car to, I'm only assuming because I don't have cameras, but that evening he paid cash, and that evening my house was broken into, and the exact amount of cash that I sold, or I got from him for the vehicle was liberated. So I think one of the things, and I'm sorry for the aside, but one of the things that I think like Brad's platform solves for is like the trust factor, because like not only do they connect you with vehicles, they also have a lot of security protocols, and they actually hold an escrow, just like a bank would. And then once the transaction is signed off on, they release those funds. So you don't have to worry about getting a bad check, or having to handle a lot of cash, or just dealing with somebody who you don't know who you're walking into, because this person, all their bank account information, all their information is stored when they create that seller account, and in order for the transaction to be completed, the funds to be released, both sides have to sign off. So
Which is like
just like,
a major innovation within like the private selling market. And like I've seen a couple of other companies doing similar things, and like it is so far superior than like a Facebook marketplace, a Craigslist, where you're like, I don't know who any of these folks are. Like there's zero trust, there's zero um intermediary. Like clearly an intermediary is going to make some money, but like there's a value in that intermediary who can connect those dots and build security for both parties, the buyer as well as the seller. And it's like it's fascinating to see that innovation. Like I don't know about you, it feels like it's happening quickly. like we're seeing it like in the used, it's happening all the time, like the private, the used market. But like being able to see that even on like the new market, it's changing so fast. 2019 was not that long ago.
Yeah, no, and I remember there was a time where like cars.com and Carvana, they were really novel concepts. Like they were really the only things out there aside from like the eBays and Craigslists of the world. Um, but then you see all these like modular steps. Like I remember like when we were like towards the tail end of the pandemic, when we were speaking to some BDRs at some of our dealership partners, and they were talking about how they're listing vehicles on Facebook Marketplace. And I think the natural evolution, kind of what I was getting at with like a lot of the OEMs and the dealers, like being a little bit behind the technology, is because like, there's a risk factor baked into making a change, right? So even though
Oh yeah.
this new tech is out there, it's not as widely adopted yet. And I think what we're going to see is that, as the market starts to normalize a little bit more and some of that power on the transactions goes back towards consumers. I think convenience and speed are going to be more and more important. And I think what we're going to see is dealers, taking a little bit more risk, ultimately for their own benefit.
Yeah, I guess the only to be determined for me is like, does it actually end up benefiting the consumer, or does that middleman marketplace intermediary then gain an additional leverage of control or take that additional cut where it may, end up at scale hurting the end consumer? But that is
Yeah,
many
I
moons
think,
from now.
yeah, and I think just to close your thoughts on that, it's kind of like think about the devil's bargain you play every time you press order on Uber Eats, right? So you're paying more, but it's just so much easier of a process. People are willing to do it. So like, do I think ultimately what it's going to lead to is prices going down and dealers taking concessions where they're making less money? No, no.
Absolutely not. Doesn't make
But
sense.
but what I do think it'll lead towards is like even if inflated, it will be a more perfect market because there's more options for consumers. And hopefully what that'll lead towards is a better overall process for the dealerships, for the OEMs, and for the folks buying cars.
Yeah, and I think the only concern I would have is does if it makes a more transparent market, is there an embedded cost of transparency because there's platforms like Amazon that are then baking in their cost for people to be able to see everything. So does it net on average an extra 10% because it's easier to see everything from these large robust platforms?
I think it's left to be seen what people are willing to pay for it.
That is indeed the case. That time will tell. Time will tell. We went long today, man.
Well, I think it's just because you didn't have to look at me in person. You could tolerate more when we're 50 miles away.
All right, Josh, thanks for making time today. It was great to connect with you, and I like riffing on this topic.
Yeah, you as well. Speak
All
soon,
right,
Eric.
have a good weekend.